This podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial by simply going to audibletrial.com/TSE. Audible has over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Simply go to audibletrial.com/TSE. You're gonna love it. Today on a podcast, I bring on a friend of mine, Jared Easley. And Jared actually is the co-founder of the podcast movement. He's actually a podcast host behind us, Starved Out podcast. And Jared and I were co-workers, great friend of mine. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we're going to dive into the episode. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about the value of helping your customers and treating them right. You're going to love this episode. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. As I mentioned, I'm bringing on a great friend of mine. If you have read my bio before or actually looked at a podcast on iTunes or any of those podcast medium and read the bio about the podcast, you're going to hear this name, Jared Easley. He's a great friend of mine. Jared is actually one of the influencers that influenced me to start this podcast. We were buddies working in the same company. Jared got involved in podcasting pretty heavily and recommended that I started a podcast of my own. And we came up on a title, The Sales Evangelist. It was a great opportunity to jump in, and we did. And now look at our podcast. We're up to 306 episodes. Jared, again, is a great friend of mine. He's just one of those people that just is amazing at making you feel good and inspiring you and motivating you. And Jared actually has done some really, really big things, and he's all about giving value, and he's going to give us some great value today as we go into this episode. But before we dive into all the fun stuff, you know we got to give some shout outs, baby. And I want to give a big shout out this week to Sean Goodwin. Thank you so much for connecting. Dave Kerr, I wish you great success, and I look forward to connecting with you. Michelle, thank you so much for connecting on LinkedIn. Joseph, thank you. Kevin O'Donnell, thank you so much. Marco, keep hustling, and thanks for the connection. And Myron, thank you. Jay, congratulations on another great year with your organization. I wish you continual success. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can go ahead and find me simply by going to LinkedIn and search for Donald C. Kelly. You can also connect with me on Instagram, Donald C. Kelly. You can also connect with me on Twitter, baby, Donald C. Kelly. If you'd like to join our Facebook group and help us grow our community to 500 evangelizers, simply go to Facebook.com and then search for the Sales Evangelizers. Again, Facebook.com, search for the Sales Evangelizers. We have 7 more days and we want to get to 500 members in our community. Go out and spread the word. I would look forward to having you. We also have a group on LinkedIn. We'd love for you to join us there, the Sales Evangelizers. But we're not going to take up much more time. Jay Money is going to give us some great insights. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Welcome to the show, Jay Money.
Donald, I was telling you right before you hit record that I don't know that I feel worthy to be on the Sales Evangelist, but it's an honor to be chatting with you today.
Jared, you are the Sales Evangelist. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But for those, if you go back to episode number 000, you will hear me talk about Jared Easley. Jared freaking Easley, the man. And this is the legend. Jared and I go way back, and Jared was the main incubator when I was thinking about the podcast, main person to motivate me towards doing this in incubation stage. So Jared, you're the godfather of the Sales Evangelist.
When I look at all your esteemed and guests that you've had that are just so smart and have given such great advice on the show, I feel like if the Sales Evangelist, Donald, for me to be now a house in this neighborhood, I'm probably the ugliest bad yard. I'm the worst house in the Sales Evangelist neighborhood, but I'm in the neighborhood.
Hey, you started from the bottom, but now you're here, right?
Yeah, I moved in, man. The neighbors may not like me, but I'm here.
Oh, man, whatever. Forget the HOA.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, man, let's talk about this, because some people might say, Jared Easley, is Jared a salesperson? But I feel that everyone has the opportunity to become an exceptional seller, and you've been able to do a lot of great things in your history, in your past several years, that you are selling. It may not be in a traditional sense where you're, out there like with a quota to fill, but you're doing a lot of selling, and I think you will bring a lot of great insight to us. And, I kind of talked about you in the beginning there about podcast movement, but would you mind telling the folks in the neighborhood
about podcast movement,
about you and what you do?
Well, I never had that's not true. I did have a inside sales job at one point in my career, but I didn't stick with it very long. And there's a number of reasons why. So I don't really consider, that I've had like a traditional sales role. But what I have learned through various scenarios is relationships are key. And when you want to make progress in whatever you're doing, whether it's sales or something else in your life, it really helps when you have key connections and you've poured yourself into those connections and you've provided value, as you teach so eloquently, Donald. And over time, as you've given and given and given, and you've been authentic with that desire to help and serve others, that over time, that when it's your turn to ask, or when it's your turn to provide value, that's, a paid service or whatever that is, more and more people are going to be open to working with you, to doing business with you when you have that relationship with them. So I think part of the opportunities that have opened up for me have all come from collaboration, and they've come from just having a relationship with someone, and they trust me. They know I'm looking out for them. They know I'm not, trying to get one over on them. And so when it comes time to pull the trigger, they're more confident in saying, hey, I can trust Jared. That's somebody that I would support, or that's someone that I would want to work with. And so, yeah, I've had cool wins, but I think it really boils down to relationships at its core.
So true, man. If we, speaking about relationships, going back to when we first met, do you remember that story?
I'd like to hear your version of it, because sometimes I get a little cloudy, but I can say that Donald and I were colleagues, that we worked together. And Donald, I just took to you immediately because you're someone who thinks big. You always encourage people to do big things. And I remember just in the first time or two of meeting you that I knew, okay, this is someone that is a person that I want to be aligned with, a person that I want to get to know better, a person that I want to chat with and think, over ideas with. And that translated early on into the possibility of potentially working together in a kind of a tech startup idea that we quickly pivoted from. And, that kind of segued into this whole podcasting space and consulting and growing a business that way. And to see where you've come, Donald, from being in that position at that company and now working full time doing the Sales Evangelist and helping so many people. I love it. I think that's a true testimony of hard work. It's a true testimony of being wise, and also the American dream, if you will. The opportunities out there for those that want to roll up the sleeves and commit. Dude,
it's so true, man. And I know we're going to keep going back and forth on this because Jared's very humble. So, but Jared, like I remember when we first, one of the things you shared with me was the concept from, I'm going to ruin it now, but how to win friends, influence others. That if you help enough people, eventually you'll get help in the end, right? I remember you first shared that with me, and then looked into the book, and I was reading the book and so forth. And I feel that you embody that, going back to the relationship and going back to when we first met, because you were just so committed towards bringing value to me. And I was like, man, if somebody is this committed to helping out, this guy sounds awesome. I got to get to know him more. And I remember we went to that diner and we started chatting and we started working with Testified.
Yep.
that idea. And it just kind of grew. But I really, tying back to that though, I really feel that there's a power in not only in the relationship side when you help other people, but just, giving back and trying to find a way. And ever since then, I'm speaking to the audience now, I've always felt committed to Jared, because no matter how much I try to one up him, he always comes back and gives more value. I'm like, dang you.
All right. So let's talk about Donald's competitive side for a moment. So I'm friends with Donald. I hang out with Donald. I'm proud to say that. And Donald, if you ever get a chance to go bowling with Donald, say no, because Donald will pretend that he's not a good bowler, but then he will actually bowl and he will kill you. And you will be like, what happened? And so, yeah, Donald is very competitive. And that's one of the things I love about you, Donald. And we laugh about it. But yeah, you are. Like, I remember one time I came to you and I said, hey, this was when Google Plus was kind of like the hot thing a few years ago. And I remember saying, hey, I got on What's Hot on Google Plus. That's when a particular post on Google Plus would, break into the What's Hot, where Google Plus is featuring it on other people's timelines, if you will. And you and I were chatting about that. And I think like a day later, you got on What's Hot. I was like, that took me like several weeks to figure out, and you did it the next day.
See, you told me how to do it, so then I went and did it.
But deep down, I was a little bitter about that. I was like, hey, that shouldn't have happened so quickly for Donald. But it did. And no, it was awesome. So,
well, Jared, it's the thing that I one of the things, like going back to like first meeting and, trying to give value and, even with the what's hot experience and all of that stuff, something that a lot of salespeople that they need to realize is kind of just like that mentality that you share. Like, I know we're going to get to this a little bit later on in the conversation. Actually, I won't jump there yet, but it's just sometimes we find that, especially me, I find the, shiny object syndrome where I want to run towards something. And I know we're going to chat about Snapchat and some of these other cool stuff out there in a little bit, but I just want to whet your appetite with that real quick. But recently you told me about an experience you had with Nissan where you went there. And this is kind of what also was a major thing we thought would be great for the podcast, because so many people don't understand that as a seller, everyone in a company is a salesperson. It doesn't matter if you are the customer service, if you're the tech guy, if whatever, the janitor, you're all in the business of moving people towards doing something. But tell us a little bit more about your experience. Your vroom vroom. No, that's Mazda, not Nissan.
Yeah, I wish that I had the vehicles that some of your guests on your show have. So I have a 2009 Nissan Altima. It is bought and paid for, of course, because we're years later. But yeah, so I still drive that car because I don't have a car payment, and it's a fine car. It's not the coolest car, but it's good enough, and it does well. And so maybe against my better judgment, that's debatable, I have continuously taken the vehicle to the local dealership where I live for routine maintenance, right? And that's including oil changes and various things that need to be done. And that can add up. That can be expensive. And some people could be rolling their eyes right now saying, oh, you just need a good mechanic. Well, I've continuously taken it there. And especially when it was under warranty, I thought, well, that's a good thing to do, because if something goes awry, they own it, more or less, they'll take care of it. And so I've noticed over the last couple of years that the service, or the quality of service at this particular dealership, had dipped extremely in the last few years. And I've had a few bad experiences, Donald, but they were never so bad that I made an issue of it. I might come back to the wife and say, I don't like the cost of this, or I didn't like the time I had to wait, or I didn't like this particular aspect. And they send out surveys at the end, and you fill out the surveys. And I always try to be optimistic and realize, hey, everybody's got their jobs and everybody's trying to do their, reasonably well. And so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt when I fill out a survey. And I'd fill out surveys, and there was one or two times where I didn't give it the best survey response, right? I kind of spoke the truth and said, well, this could have been better. But I don't feel like it was ever from a complaining spirit, Donald. I tried to treat others fairly, because I know what it's like when people, dump on you and they're saying, oh, Donald is this terrible person. I don't think anyone would say that about you, Donald, but I think you get the point.
Yeah.
And so recently I was going to go do a business trip, a speaking opportunity, and a couple things up in Tampa, Florida. So we live in South Florida, and that's about a 4-hour drive. And I wanted to drive my Nissan. But I remember from my previous visit to the dealership, they had recommended some service that I needed, that they said, the sooner that you can get this done, the better. So I figured, well, I better go ahead and get those things accomplished before I try to take a 4-hour drive out of town. And I took the vehicle in, and their rate for all the recommended service that was required was about $1,200. Actually, a little bit over $1,200, which, for most people, that's a reasonable chunk of change, especially if you're spending on a used car. So I went ahead and I went forward with it. Yeah, let's knock this out. And I made sure that they understood that the goal was for me to drive this car out of town in a few days. So I just want to make sure everything's good for that. And not to take too long on the story, but got the vehicle back in, I'd say, not an unreasonable amount of time. I believe I left it there overnight because I had flexibility that day, and I could tell they were a little backed up. And so I said, yeah, it's fine. Just don't make sure it's done correctly. I can pick it up the next morning. And so I got the little shuttle. They provide a shuttle, which is a nice feature there. And so this shuttle came and got me. I came back to get the car. And as I was driving away, I noticed like a little clicking sound. And I thought, okay, that doesn't sound right. I better get this looked at. And anyway, that next day, because I didn't get it looked at that day, I had a couple things going on. I was taking my daughter to school. It was early in the morning. And the front left wheel completely locked up on me, Donald.
No way.
And yeah, and it was really dangerous too. It happened in a kind of a busy street, and I was fortunately able to pull over and get the car to the side and out of the way. But I was unable to drive the car. The car wheel was locked up, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Obviously, I was a little frustrated, and I had my little one with me, so it wasn't very safe. So But again, I keep my cool. I call the dealership. I say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but this front wheel is completely locked up. I'm positive it's had something to do with what we just worked on yesterday. So they said, okay, we'll call this towing company and so on and so forth. So I call the towing company. It's going to be 2 hours before they can get there. So I ended up having to get my daughter to school. And that's another story, but we were fortunate. We were pretty close. So we ended up walking. So I walked her to school. I wait for the tow truck. It comes and picks up the car. I take it to the dealership. Apparently they had forgotten or they had accidentally stripped a bolt or something. And it was really just them not being attentive and not being careful. And so there was a bolt that had come loose and that had caused this problem. And they were like, we're going to fix this immediately. We'll take care of the tow, no cost to you. We'll get this fixed. And so while I wasn't pleased, they did what I consider the right thing. And so I get the car back and I think, okay, finally we're good. And I picked up my wife after I got the car back several hours later. And my wife looks on the side of the car and she sees the front right side of the vehicle was popped out. Like, I don't know how, like the frame, it like popped out. And I was like, how does this even happen? And she's like, you got to take it back. I was like, yeah, of course. I'm not going to, that happened because it was there. There's no way that just happened in the, few minutes that I've driven off the lot or whatever. So I didn't inspect the vehicle thoroughly because I just took their word that they had taken care of it. So I take the car back. I'm like, hey, look, this is out. This has to be fixed. So about an hour later, they fixed it. but I mean, you could keep tally here, Donald. I mean, this is 2 times on top of the original visit. And then the very next day, believe it or not, there's one more thing that finally broke the straw. Is I was driving to meet a friend for lunch, our mutual friend, Nico Johnson, and I were going to go have some Jamaican food, some jerk chicken, Donald.
Yeah,
we know not to beg for jerk chicken, but we were going to have
jerk chicken.
En route to that luncheon, I noticed a problem with the car, and my lights were coming on, and things were going wrong. I was driving on the turnpike, so I immediately took the next exit, pulled over, and the splash guard that was underneath the front of my car had completely come loose, and it was dragging in the street. So it was, obviously that's not a safe thing, and it was making loud noises, and I didn't feel safe driving. I asked several people that were in this parking lot to help me, look at it. Did they think it was safe? They're like, no, if that was me, I wouldn't drive the car. So long story short, Donald, I had to get the car towed a second time back to the dealership because I wasn't in a position to. I even tried initially to ghetto tie this splash guard back up under the vehicle, and it wasn't going to work. So I had called this same tow truck, wait for them. It was an hour this time, so that was better, and I had to take it back, and we took it back to the dealership again, and then they tried to charge me $130. Like, we didn't do this. This is you. We didn't do this. I'm like, no, you were just working on the tire 2 days ago. You guys had to pull that splash guard down to work on that tire. So, this is not me. This is you guys messing up. And I've had, again, this is the 3rd time I've come in since the initial visit. So that's 4 times in a week I've been here. And again, these guys were adamant, like, you're going to have to pay for this. And I was like, no, I almost never argue, Donald, but in this case I had to argue. And then the supervisor said to me, he said, well, I've tried to work with you in the past, but then all you do is leave us bad survey results. He said this to me. And I remember thinking, oh man, you shouldn't have gone there. And I thought those like survey results were kind of anonymous, you know, clearly not. I just told her, look, this is not my fault. This is the 4th time I've been here. This needs to be covered. I'm not going to take care of this. You guys need to take care of this. And after a while, one of the attendants said, hey, don't worry about it. We'll get it resolved. Just go ahead. So after they had fixed it, of course. So they fixed it, and I drove away thinking that was such a horrible experience. I don't ever want to go there again. Now I'm furious, And after I had some time to cool down, and I mean, this is like a week later, and I'd had some time to process it, I realized what I had just gone through was so frustrating. It took time away from my job. It was just a time-extensive thing, and I'd spent that original money thinking, hey, this is going to take care of this, but it just led to more and more problems. And I thought, I didn't get a good response from them. It's like I was wasting their time, me coming back to have them take care of what they did. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to warn people about this because I don't feel like I was treated fairly. And so this is the first time I've ever done this, Donald. I took to Facebook, I took to Google reviews, Edmunds.com, Cars.com, all these sites, even Yelp.com, and left reviews for that car dealership. And I also wrote an email to Nissan Corporate. I contacted the GM for that specific dealership, letting him know what happened, explaining everything we just talked about. And now I thought, okay, I can break free. I'm good. I'm walking away. This is burning the bridge, but I've let everybody know how I feel and what happened. And I didn't feel like it was out of line. I told the truth. I said what happened. And this is a warning for anybody that looks at review sites. They'll know, hey, be careful with these guys. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting some emails and phone calls from Nissan Corporate, but they were more just kind of, following, connecting dots. They weren't really trying to help. And, maybe that's just kind of normal stuff. And then I did receive an email from the GM, but it was more of, I'm sorry you went through that. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't anything like, how can we make this right? And about a week after that, Donald, you and I had lunch. And after lunch, I got this call, and it was from the lady that did social media for the dealership. And she basically wanted me to get on a call with her. So I called her up, and she said, hey, we know you contacted Nissan Corporate. We know you emailed the GM. And she said, all I can say is, until you started leaving reviews, public reviews, like, now we're listening. Now we hear. Yeah, now we hear you, and now we want to try to make this right. And so she was very political with the way she said it, but she basically said, what you've done up to this point is, the right steps. You're trying to reconcile it, but that fell on deaf ears. And it was when you left public reviews that make us potentially look bad. Now we're willing to try to reconcile it. And so she offered me $1,000 maintenance credit. And if I was willing to bring the car back, they'd give me $1,000 maintenance credit. And then on top of that, they asked me that if I'm happy with the maintenance that occurs, if I would consider changing the negative reviews that I left. And so, Donald, that was a long story, but the whole reason I share that is for someone out there who's a consumer who's getting a customer service experience that they might not think is the best. I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow the correct channels or what you feel are the right channels to reconcile the problem, but if you're not seeing results that are reasonable, consider leaving these reviews. And it's not good to just blast people just to blast them, but if you're honest and you're telling the truth and you're warning people about a service that was negative that you've tried to reconcile, I think that's a good thing to do. And so in this case, companies that are trying to have a conscience, trying to, keep a good reputation with the community, they'll see those reviews and they'll hopefully make a decision to try to reconcile it. So in this case, me reaching out to Nissan Corporate, me writing an email to the GM, that was worthless. But when I posted something publicly where people see these reviews and I was very honest about it, then they wanted to instantly give me $1,000 maintenance credit and try to work with me to get this resolved. Now, I'm glad to say, Donald, that we have resolved it. And I have gone in, I have taken the vehicle in to get some more service done. And it was a good experience this time. So I'm proud that played out, and I'm glad that, we're in a better situation than we were. But I did think it was unfortunate that it took those things occurring to get to that result. So I hope the takeaway here for people who are listening on Sales Evangelist is don't be afraid to pull a trigger on a negative review, not to be mean, but if that situation warrants that, don't be afraid to do that, because that might be the catalyst that actually helps you to reconcile this and get something to fix the situation with that company. They're probably paying attention and they're probably wanting to make it right. But unfortunately, it might require you being public.
It's so true, Jared. And I think sometimes too, when you if taking it from your experience, if I have a business where I have any type of customer, people facing the customers, it's just imperative that they listen and understand. And you could think about this from a sales representative or even from an entrepreneur standpoint, even for a small business, even like mine. You can still look at it and say, how am I giving the best service to an individual? And I feel that one of the things my wife shared with me, especially within corporate, she does work in commercial real estate. But one of the things is that, how does she put it? She always under promises and then over delivers. You know what I mean? And if you can, always just find ways to over deliver and give a little bit more to your customers, your clients, they're always going to love you and they're always going to be grateful for doing business with you. So, I mean, and what you were asking, it wasn't like anything crazy. It was just fix my car so it could work properly.
Yeah, I was not able to drive that car to Tampa, by the way. I had to take my wife's car. So yeah, I don't tell that story to say poor is me. Well, here's a complaint. That's not the desire, but I hope people learn from that. And there's a really good book for organizations and businesses that are wanting to handle those types of scenarios the right way. It's by Jay Baer. It's called Hug Your Haters. And Jay just does an excellent job walking through in that book of the right way to respond, the right way to be helpful, the right way to resolve situations and keep your haters around, because your haters can actually be one of your biggest assets, and pointing out some of the areas that you want to adjust in your business. So that's a really good book.
It's awesome. I'll make sure we'll put that in our show notes.
Good deal.
Jared, we got a couple more things I want to hit on before we depart today, because I thought that story was fabulous. And I think it ties very, very well with sales reps. But here's another thing that people may not realize that ties so closely with sales is The Walking Dead.
Clearly, The Walking Dead.
Clearly, The Walking Dead ties to sales. There's so many, I think maybe because I'm just like so, into sales, everything is sales. You look for opportunities to find sales lessons in Walking Dead. Can you think of any sales lessons from The Walking Dead, Jared? Let's pull one of them out together.
Well, Donald, I love The Walking Dead. I know you love The Walking Dead. It's likely there's people who are listening that watch that are familiar with that, and then there's some that don't. But there are some interesting takeaways from that show, and you and I have not rehearsed this, so these are things that we're just coming up with on the fly. But one of the things that sticks out to me immediately, Donald, is the idea of cooler heads prevailing. And what I mean by that is in sales, you got to keep your cool when things aren't going a certain way with a pipeline, or clients or prospective clients not reacting the way that you're hoping they will, or something along those lines. If you look at The Walking Dead, there are scenes where things go wrong and people just jump and react. They're not taking time to really think through what they're doing. And because of that, they go off and they get captured, or they go off and they get bit, or they go off, something negative happens, where if they were just able to just chill out and think through this, they could have had what I consider a better result. So that's the first thing that jumps out at me is take the time to really think through things. Don't just jump to jump. There are seasons and moments where you need to react and you need to respond, but it's always good when you have a plan and you don't just jump just because you're frustrated or you're upset or something didn't go a certain way. What do you think?
I totally agree with that. And one of the ones that I see throughout the whole seasons, every season of Walking Dead so far, is you got to be creative. As a sales rep, you have to find creative ways to get around to some of your major challenges, because I don't care who you are, no matter what you're doing, especially as a business owner too, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to come upon challenges. You're going to come upon difficulties. And especially someone like, working, you and Dan putting on Podcast Movement, you guys have come across a lot of different difficulties. But what I've come to realize, the people who tend to be the most creative and trying to find solution, brainstorming, working with your clients, working with potential customers, and to come up with really good solutions, really creative ideas, you find that they always have a way of making things work, and it just always works out so awesome. And I'll give you an example specifically, like with The Walking Dead. One of the things that happened was, especially if you're watching, I won't spoil this season. Let's go,
right.
Let's go, past seasons, especially with, I think it was after they left the farm. If anyone watches the show, they were on this farm, they were with Herschel, and all these, zombies, walkers, quote unquote, came and, destroyed the farm. But they had to pivot. They had to find a new way, and they were creative. And eventually they were able to work together. And then the other principle I like with The Walking Dead that I see all the time is collaborating with the right people. Yep. In sales or in any type of business, you have to make sure you collaborate with the right people. And they did that masterfully with a couple groups. Eventually, when they came to their current place, Alexander, and now they're able to integrate and brought value to that community. And then they became, intricate part and leaders in that community because 1, they were creative whenever they came across a problem. 2, they collaborated with the right people. And then 3, they made sure that they brought value. When you bring value, you always come off on top.
One last thing I want to add, Donald, because those were excellent points. And I love how we just conjured this up, just talking about The Walking Dead. But another thing that sticks out to me is that survival instinct that each day we don't know if we're going to make it. So we got to really make it count. We got to hustle. We got to work hard to take care of the things that we need to take care of to survive. And in business and sales, you got to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to make this happen. And I'm not going to just take a break today. I'm not going to just chill. I'm going to work hard and go for what I need to go for. And that's something I think you could definitely relate to watching The Walking Dead.
Jared, I totally agree with that, man. I think I'm going to turn this into like a in email as well. We could probably get a lot of this. We're coming up on that 30-minute mark, and I want to respect your time, Jared, but I want to get one last thing. We talked about it at the beginning. A lot of times as sellers, or entrepreneurs, individual human beings, we tend to run to the shiny object, and we fall into the shiny object syndrome. And one of those things that we see out there are just like, there are a bunch of different apps and things that pop up on the scene. And I love using technology to make sure I increase my sales and to be more effective. But do you feel that sometimes we go overboard with that?
I do. I think there's really smart investors who spend a lot of money in these apps, and they're invested financially, and they want to make these opportunities, is the air quote I'm using here, as sexy as possible to make you feel like you need this in order to grow, in order to connect, in order to do these things. And that's not always the case. And so my encouragement is, don't be foolish. Don't let shiny marketing make you feel like, hey, I've got to just jump on this bandwagon because I'm missing out, because it's likely you're not missing out. You should know, where are your target people? Where are the people you're trying to work with? Where are they? And that's where you need to focus your time and your energy, because if they're on Facebook, great, be on Facebook. But if they're not on Snapchat, you probably don't need to be spending lots of time trying to learn a new tool just because the investors spent a lot of money and brought in a bunch of influential people and celebrities, to make you think you need to do that too. So yeah, I think be careful. There's a lot of things that will say, hey, you need this, but not necessarily. You have the capability to go out and create and do things and connect generously, and that may not be with the shiniest new object.
Dude, so true on that one. And I had a similar conversation with somebody recently about Snapchat. It's cool. It looks awesome. I haven't found a way for myself to go in there. I mean, I have other opportunities in other areas that I've been focusing on. And at this point in my business, it could work, but it's not what I'm needed at this point. I know what's working for me, and that's what I'm going to keep improving on. But for everyone, same thing. Some people might say Facebook is a waste of time for my business. I'm focusing on Instagram or whatever, or, LinkedIn is a place that I need to camp out. Whatever it is, utilize social selling is awesome and bring value to folks, but make sure you don't get distracted and you start wasting your time. True.
It might not even be social media. It might be in your local community where you're going to different meetings and different, places to connect with people in your neighborhoods or whatever. And so, I think a lot of people get caught up and they get excited, and some of that's cool. Some of that's fun, but yeah, that may not be the best use of your time and setting you up for success. I want to part, Donald, if it's okay, with, or try to wrap up with one final thought. I heard Ashton Kutcher speak one time. He accepted an award. It was the Teen Choice Awards. This was back in 2013. And he's probably about 38 years old now. So it's kind of funny to see someone of his age speaking to teenagers. But he did a great job. He took the opportunity at that award. He won the Ultimate Choice Award. And he imparted this advice to younger fans about making the best out of life. And I thought it was really good. So I wanted to share this on the Sales Evangelist. He talked about work. And I've kind of touched on this, but he said, this is a quote. He says, "I believe that opportunity looks a lot like work." He said, "I never had a job in my life that I was better than. I was always just lucky to have a job. Every job I had was a stepping stone to my next job, and I never quit my job before I had my next job." And that was bullet point one. Opportunity looks a lot like work. And so for the person who's hustling, who may not be seeing the great sales results right away, just do your best. Be focused. Make the most of that opportunity. Be a good steward of where you are, because that's going to be that stepping stone to that next opportunity. And it may not feel like it today, but if you can really hone in on that, that's going to open up opportunities. That's going to increase your confidence. And Donald, we've seen that. I know through our conversations, there were moments where you had self-doubt in your various sales roles, and you had to push through that. And I remember one time you making a comment saying, "Hey, if I was ever in another sales job after this, I would never doubt myself, because this product can be one of the toughest products to sell. If I can sell this, I can sell anything." And you were a good steward of that opportunity. And I love how that's propelled you forward. The second thing that Ashton said was, he talked about the importance of intelligence, which we touched on. He said the sexiest thing in the entire world is being really smart and being thoughtful and being generous. Everything else is, he used the word crap. I don't know if we want to use that on the podcast, but it's basically a waste of your time. It's just stuff that people are trying to sell you to make you feel like you're less. So don't buy it. Be smart, be thoughtful, and be generous. And he talked about Steve Jobs. He said, Steve Jobs said, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way that it is. And he ended by saying, Everything around us that we call life is made up of people that are no smarter than you. And you can build your own things. You can build your own life that the other people can live in. So build a life, don't live one, find your opportunities, and always be sexy. And I just thought that was well said and good advice no matter what you're up to. So
dang, dude, I love that, man. Makes so much sense. Jared, you just hit it out the park, man. Home run. Great episode today, man. Thanks so much for coming out and sharing with us. If folks out there want to get in touch with you or to learn about you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
First thing I want to do is be checking out the Sales Evangelist. Check out this episode, show notes. And then I also have a podcast called Starve the Doubt. So for people who might have friends that struggle with self-doubt and overcoming that, they can check that out. And then, of course, we have an event for podcasters called Podcast Movement. That's worth looking at, too. Podcastmovement.com.
Hey, man, it's going to be fun in Chicago and Chi-Town. So, definitely connect with Jared and learn more about that. I think it's going to be a pretty phenomenal event from the lineup that you guys have, Jared, man. So congratulations on that.
Donald, thank you again.
J Money gave us some great thoughts. J Money gave us some great insights, baby. I'm telling you, Jared knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing. And that experience teaches us a lot. It teaches us that, you got to treat your customers right. And then you got to recognize when you do make a mistake, be willing to admit to it because people will tell others about it. They'll evangelize about it, either good or bad. And I'm all about getting people to evangelize by just offering good, offering value. And I know this is exactly what happened in Jared's situation there. He wanted to go out after they corrected their problems, corrected their issues. He went out and evangelized good for this company. And it's amazing. So I highly recommend that you implement those same practices in your business. Start from today. What can you do to listen? What can you do to help? What little things are you overlooking that if you were to attend to could make a big difference with your clients to go out and evangelize for you? Maybe a good thought as you can sit down with your team and to discuss your process and see what you can improve on. Now, if you want to get connected with Jared, which I highly recommend you do, he's very active on a lot of mediums, specifically on Twitter. So if you want to get connected with Jay, just simply go to thesalesevangelist.com/the word episode number 306. You can learn about all the different mediums, how you can get connected with Jared. Again, thesalesevangelist.com/the word episode number 306. Jared will be at Podcast Movement this year, of course, because him and Dan Franks are behind they're masterminds behind this. And your boy Donald will be there as well. I have the opportunity to be there to help and to participate. And I've been looking forward to this. It's going to be great. So simply go to thesalesevangelist.com/the word episode number 306. Learn about Jared, learn about all the great things that he's doing and all the great success that he's accomplished. He's a great individual to follow and to connect with. Speaking about following and to connect with, I want to give you this free offer. Simply go to audibletrial.com/TSE to get connected, get a free audiobook download. The book that I've been recommending and I've been listening to is Pitch Anything by Orrin Claff. You can simply go and learn a little bit more about the book by going to audibletrial.com/TSE or just going back to our website, thesalesevangelist.com/the word episode number 306. Get connected with Jared and also get connected to get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. What's the worst that can happen? You get a free book. All in all, I want you to be successful. I want you to be happy. But most importantly, I want you to go out and do big things.